What's up, what's up, what's up? Your boy Domuto. We're back with another video. Today we're watching JxmyHighroller. I watched the video from him for a minute, but we're watching, we are witnessing the worst pro sports team of all time. Yes, the Pistons still got the losing streak. They did win a game against the Raptors. Shout out to the Pistons, you know what I'm saying? I thought that bitch was going to get to 30, but the Raptors fucking suck. So, I mean, the Pistons suck, but the Raptors fucking suck. Anyway, yeah, it's terrible, you know. And like, when people think is, like, people like, oh, Philly sucked. That Philly team that had the record before them, like, nigga, Philly was trying to lose. That team with fucking Tony Roten and Nerlens Noel and Evan Turner, like that team was ass. That team was trying to get the #1 pick. The Pistons team is trying to win, and that makes it worse. I ain't gonna lie, that makes it worse. I remember that Philly, that Sixers challenge. I forgot what 2K that was. That like 2K15, 14 or something like that. We had to play with that Sixers team. And if you get away with that Sixers team, you was good at basketball. I remember playing that bitch. I tried to play with that Philly team. I almost won, but I lost. I remember that. I almost won a couple of times, but I lost because that team was fucking ass. I couldn't play with them. Anyway, let's get to the video. Tony Roten. Fucking Isaiah Cannon. I know.
Huge size of relief.
You see this? This is what a losing team looks like. But not just the losing team of this particular game, but a team that has lost more consecutive games than any team ever has. In every single season in the history of pro sports in North America. The Pistons are really bad, but they're not just bad relative to this season. They're not even just bad for an NBA team. They are possibly the worst North American pro sports team ever.
Oh, damn.
28 straight loss.
Shout out my boy K, you know, he played for OSU. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Oklahoma. I'm not from Oklahoma.
Today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek. With football season upon us and basketball in full swing, save yourself the time and hassle of looking for good tickets and killer deals with SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek, and get $20 off your first purchase. How bad does a team need to be in order to be the worst team? Like, ever. In North America, professional sports have been around for over a century, starting with the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs in 1876, followed by the American League of Professional Baseball in 1901, forming the MLB in 1903. 14 years later, the National Hockey League was established in 1917, and then came the NFL, formerly known as the American Professional Football Association, 3 years later in 1920. The fourth and final major sport didn't come about until 1946, when the Basketball Association of America was founded, known today as the NBA. And over the last 148 years, these four leagues have expanded and grown to now include 124 teams across 2 countries. 124 teams, nearly 150 years of history, thousands of individual team seasons. And yet, throughout all of this, one team has to inevitably be the worst one. And that team is playing right now in Detroit. What the Pistons have managed to do so far this season isn't just bad. Their incompetence is a statistical anomaly. At the moment, the Pistons are on a 28-game losing streak. 28 games, 28 losses in a row. Now, y'all remember the Cleveland Browns back in 2016 and 2017? Just how bad they were? Well, they lost 17 games in a row across 2 seasons. They were horrendous for 2 full seasons. But their losing streak is only the 62nd longest in North American pro sports history. To find this year's Pistons, you have to take a nosedive through 150 years of sports.
NFL kind of like, they play less games though. Like, that's kind of, so if the Browns are going 0-16 for 2 years, damn near,
Some
Yeah,
of
that's
the
kind
worst
of worse.
teams
That's
imaginable.
kind of bad. I ain't gonna
Then
lie.
keep going, and then go some more until you've reached rock bottom, with the second longest losing streak in pro sports. The only team that
Cardinals.
strung together more consecutive losses were the mid-1940s Chicago Cardinals of the NFL,
That's some
who spent
ass.
4 seasons just losing a whole bunch of games in a row. To put some perspective on just how bad the Pistons are, the San Jose Sharks are the worst team in the NHL this season. In fact, they're on pace to being one of the worst teams in recent history, and they have a win percentage of 27.2%. The Pistons would need to go on a 9-game winning streak starting with their next game just to catch up to how bad the Sharks have been this season. But it gets even worse. The Panthers have been the worst team in the NFL this season, winning just 2 of their 15 games. Their win percentage is just 13.3%, which means right now, the
Less
Pistons
games.
are
Come on now,
relatively
Jimmy.
half as good as the worst team in the National Football League. But my friends, it gets even worse. Because over in the MLB, there's one clear frontrunner as the worst team in the league, and that is the Oakland A's. The A's played so bad last season that it literally cost the city of Oakland their baseball team. And still, the A's finished the 2023 season with a winning percentage of 30.9%
Why they play that many
and a record
games in
of
baseball?
50-112. If you scale their season down to 82 games, that's equivalent to an NBA team winning about 25 games in a season. From the time this season started, the Pistons are on pace to winning 25 games, sometime around mid-season, in 2028. The Pistons are a horrifically bad team. In fact, they are so bad that comparing them to other teams this year, even across other sports, there is still
I heard last year they
no
only won like
competition
10
for who the
games.
worst team is.
Count
In order
from
to
last
do that,
season to
we
now.
have to pull out the record books. Here are the 10
That mean
worst
they won
teams
8
in NBA
games
history
last season
according to win percentage.
2023.
Now, it makes sense to use
then they
win
won
percentage
2
here over
games
actual
this
number
year,
of
last
wins
season,
because every
at the end of
season
the
does
year.
not have the same amount of games. For example, the Providence Steamrollers won just 6 games back in the Stone Age, but they only played 48 games the entire
that
season.
Bobcats record
And then,
is
of
crazy.
course, there are the 2012 Bobcats, who won just 7 games in a 66-game shortened season. I vividly remember this Bobcats team. They were so bad that the discourse around them that season wasn't about if they were just the worst team in the NBA.
They won 82 games.
It was
They would've
about if the
won more
Kentucky
games.
men's basketball team,
I remember
a
that.
college team, could beat them in a game.
I remember that.
This team was disgusting. And yet, somehow, the 2024 Pistons are losing more games than that Bobcats team did. Even in a shortened 66-game season, the Bobcats managed to win 7 games. This season, with a full 82-game schedule, the Pistons are on pace to winning just 5, which would essentially make them about twice as bad
2016?
as the
Okay,
next
that's
worst team in
2016 Philly.
NBA history. If we compare the Pistons to the worst teams in MLB history, they are still, by a massive margin, worse than any team that has ever played in Major League Baseball's
winning
148-year
20 games
history.
out of
The last time a team in Major League Baseball was even
54 games.
remotely close to as bad as this year's Pistons,
crazy.
the league sounded more like a branch of government than it did a professional sports league. The Colonels, the Nationals, the Senators, the Cowboys go back nearly 150 years, and still, you will not find a team as bad as this year's Pistons. But the worst team in MLB history, according to Team Record, were the Cleveland Spiders.
Spiders?
Yes, this was a real team. And no, they were not as bad as this year's Pistons. Going 20-134 on the season, the Spiders had the worst winning percentage in league history of just 13%, which means they were still winning twice as often as Detroit is this season. Detroit's record, at the moment, would be the equivalent to an MLB team winning just 10 games in an entire 162-game season.
Damn.
But what about the NHL? Nearly 100 years of history. There's gotta be one team that just couldn't win games, right? No. In 1975, the Washington Capitals were one of 2 teams added to the league in an expansion year. The team was literally built from scratch. Sort of a Frankenstein of a roster, loaded with free agents, young prospects, players who had never even played a minute of professional hockey in their careers, bits and pieces from other teams. By no means was this team expected to win many games. and they didn't. The Capitals finished the season with the worst record in NHL history, winning just 8 games. But back then, NHL games could end in a tie, essentially giving half wins in those scenarios. So
crazy.
those 8 wins got the Capitals to a win percentage of 13.1%, very similar to the worst teams throughout NBA and NFL history, which makes the Pistons still far worse than the worst team in NHL history.
Damn.
A team that was playing in its first season with new players, new ownership, and virtually no expectations.
That's crazy.
But that leaves us with the NFL. And as many of you know, there have been a handful of winless teams throughout the league's history. And 5 potential wins is still better than 0 wins, right? Wrong. I believe that a team on pace to winning 5 or 6 games in an 82-game NBA season is still worse than most, if not all, 0-win teams in NFL history. For example, take the most recent 0-win team in the NFL, the 2017 Browns, one of the 8 winless teams throughout the NFL's history.
That's crazy
In
how
that
they turn
2017
around.
season, despite winning 0 games, the Browns had an average point differential of negative 11 points, meaning on average, they lost every single game that season by 11, which sounds bad because it is. And yet that still only ranks as the 109th worst team point differential in league history. They were losing, but they were still competing compared to some other bad teams throughout the NFL's history. In fact, there have been teams who were losing games on average by twice as much as the 0-win Browns. But at least those teams still managed to win a game or 2. The Pistons, on the other hand, oddly enough, have a similar average point differential of negative 11.53, which is the 5th worst point differential in the history of the NBA.
Damn.
So they're not only losing damn near every game, they aren't even competing. And the 4 teams that were losing by more than the Pistons still managed to win double-digit games, or at least were nearly on pace to in a full season. The Pistons aren't just losing games. They are getting blown out in nearly every game.
They'll get 10
wins. So now that we
wins.
know, at least at this moment,
They'll get
the
10
Pistons
wins.
are worse than any NBA team ever. They're worse than any MLB team ever. They are worse than every NHL team that has ever taken the ice. And they're probably worse, if not as bad, as the worst NFL teams ever. I think it's safe to say that at the pace they're on, they could potentially finish this season as the worst major pro sports team North America has ever seen. So how exactly can a team be this bad? How does this happen?
Team that's trying to win,
First,
by the way.
this is a very young team. The 3rd youngest team in the NBA with an average age of just 23 years old.
That
The
is young.
majority of their minutes going to these young guys with hardly
Might
any
wanna trade
NBA
all them
experience
old
and
niggas.
no real opportunity or guidance to learn the ropes before being thrown into the lion's den every game. And part of this is for reason number 2, which is injuries. With 2 of their oldest players and their 2 highest paid players, Bojan Bogdanovic and Joe Harris, missing the majority of the season
They don't
so
even
far
play Joe
due
Harris.
to injuries. The lack of veteran leadership
Joe
in
Harris
this locker
healthy.
room and on the court has seemed to have made a real negative impact on this team's morale and their ability to fight through adversity. Most of these young guys have never been in a situation where they need to lead or even carry a bad team to victories. This takes time to learn, and right now, nearly every player on this roster is learning this all simultaneously. Whether they are even capable is a whole nother topic. This is why Alec Burks, a career role player, can oftentimes be found with the ball in his hands late in these games. He's a 12-year NBA vet who has
Right.
logged enough minutes to at least have some idea of how to navigate close, competitive games. This team also can't close out any games. Even the worst teams can usually squeeze out some tough wins just by sheer luck, if nothing else. The Pistons have found themselves in clutch situations 14 times this season. That's games within 5 points with 5 minutes or less remaining in the 4th quarter.
Damn.
And in those clutch moments, the Pistons have shot, by far, a league low of 23.3% from the field
Damn.
while scoring 4.2 points. Less than half of the league average. This has led them to win just 1 of their 14 relatively winnable games. If they are just not horrific in the final minutes of these games, they win at least a few of these matchups. And it may sound like an oversimplification, but the Pistons just can't score or defend. Of the 11 players on their roster attempting at least one three-pointer a game, just 3 of them are shooting at a league average
Marcus.
percentage. And one of those 3 players is their starting center. The other 8 players have a combined three-point percentage
Starting
of
power
just
forward.
29.2%, essentially making them
Why
one
is
of,
Kevin
if
Knox
not
playing?
the worst shooting team since the 3-ball
That
really
nigga
took off a
is fucking
decade ago.
doo-doo.
Add that to the fact that this team is abysmal defensively, allowing over 120 points per game, while only scoring 109 points per game, and you have a recipe for disaster.
Tragic.
They have no depth. Outside of Cade Cunningham and a downhill Jaden Ivey, they don't have anyone who can create their own shot. And to add fuel to the fire, they are leading the league in turnovers and fouls committed. So they can't even hold on to the ball, and they're giving up more free
I heard
points
it was
to their
high
opponents
turnovers.
than any other team in the league. So they're not just bad at every aspect of the game,
It's
they
Aggies.
are virtually the worst at every
Alligator
aspect of the
Aggies.
game. And what makes this situation worse, if that's even possible, is that most bad teams throughout NBA history, and even recent sports history, are losing almost on purpose in an effort to tank. And you know when a team is tanking, not spending any money, loading up on picks, dumping off assets to make room for a rebuild. The Pistons are this bad, and they're actually trying to win.
I said
they
that.
hired Monty Williams this past offseason with, at the time, the highest
Monty was not a
salary
developing
of any
coach.
coach in NBA history. They have 5 top 10 picks over the last 4 seasons.
That's what I will say about some of these teams. Some of these teams have these good coaches. Coaches are, you have to be very specific how you pick a coach. You know what I'm saying? Because some of these coaches, like tell you something, I think Tom Thibodeau is good. Is a good coach for like young players. You know, the Knicks team's pretty young. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, it's pretty young. It's pretty young. So teams that are pretty young, Tom Thibodeau's good. Now, when the teams start getting older, Tom Thibodeau, I don't think he's, you know, nah, it's not gonna work. I don't think. I'm trying to think of an example of a team he coached that was like, nah, it's not the right team for him. When I say young, I mean not developing. I mean like a young team, like per se. You know, I think when he goes to the Pelicans, I remember the Pelicans and that team, they didn't work out because the team was too young. It was developing. He's not a developing coach. My team was not a developing coach. He's you need a good team. You need a good roster type of coach. You know what I'm saying? Trying to think of another team. Another like Doc Rivers. He is you need a championship roster. You know what I'm saying? A good roster type of coach. He's not a developing team coach. You don't want that. You don't want Doc Rivers on the fucking coaching the Hornets. No, that's not gonna work. That's not the type of coach he is. No.
Seasons on their roster in Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, number 1 overall pick in Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes, and James Wiseman. This team is trying to win. They just can't. On his podcast last week, Bill Simmons made a great point about the whole situation that really put into perspective just how bad and even how unlucky this team has been so far this season. With the parity in the modern NBA and the depth and the three-point variance that can create double-digit point swings in just a matter of seconds, losing 28 games in a row is almost like flipping a coin 28 times and it landing on heads 28 times in a row. The Pistons' struggles this season aren't just bad, they're bordering statistical improbability at this point. It is truly fascinating to see. But this is exactly why, if they keep this up for the remainder of the season, the 2023-2024 Pistons won't just become the worst NBA team of all time, they will be the worst professional sports team in North American history.
Yeah. Man, shout out to Pistons fans, man. I get it, man. It sucks. It sucks, I guess. Ooh. You know, I thought the Knicks was terrible for years, but the Pistons, oh man, them niggas haven't been good. Low key, ain't the 20th anniversary of the 04 championship? Oh yeah. Yeah, y'all niggas, the way y'all fall from grace is crazy. That's crazy, nigga. The Pistons not good, man. They're not a good they don't know how to rebuild. Anyway, shout out to JxmyHighroller for this video. Make sure you check out the last JxmyHighroller video I reacted to. Check out another great video that I reacted to right here. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.